Oh, from New York, you are listening to Extra Time. I'm Andrew Wiebe with my partners in soccer, Matt Doyle, David Goss, this mug of hot chocolate. It's a wonderful day. 4 teams remain, 3 games to go, 1 champion to crown. Conference finals coming up Saturday.
Do you say your own name?
No, I thought about it, but this mug of hot chocolate has brought new life.
Jesus, you have
to be on this chilly day.
So many times in 5 minutes.
I made the decision before the show. It's the first time I've done it. It's chilly. We're all sort of bundled up here, and it has got sugar, a little bit of cocoa. It's just taking me to a new level.
This is like the most Kansan conversation I've ever had.
Got a cable knit sweater on.
Anyone who says the word cocoa is a person I've never met before.
That's the literal spice.
Yeah.
It's the flavoring. It's a big weekend, big show here. We are going to dig very deep into the 2 conference finals. Hell is indeed real. Cincinnati, Columbus, 6 p.m. Eastern time, MLS Season Pass on Apple TV. Coverage starts at 5:30. Kalen Kyle hosting, Sasha Kleshchin, BWP, and myself in the studio. We'll watch that game together. There'll be a full hour starting at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on MLS Season Pass. Coverage leading into LAFC Houston at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. Should be a wonderful Saturday, and we will then know where in the great state of Ohio we are going on December 9th for MLS Cup.
Is this the best week of the season?
Ooh. I do think the weeks where it's not...
Doyle's thankful for Leagues Cup. So
right. Yeah, well, that's my thing.
But there was an element to Leagues Cup that is similar here in that you can watch every game and be completely focused on that one game, understand the stakes like that. There's no sort of debate, question marks. It's like, hey, this is for a spot in Cup. And there's not, hey, there's 14 games on tonight. Are you going to choose the right one? Are you going to be me and choose the wrong one and always see someone else tweet about an awesome goal as you're watching a scoreless game? There's none of that. One game, watch it. Second game, watch it. Know where you're going for MLS Cup. It's perfect. By the way, this time of year is also about the Spotify Wrap. We got a bunch of people hitting us up. Noah tweeted me this morning and said, Extra Time Radio, I enjoyed every one of the 3,468 minutes I spent with you in 2023. Thank you. I did the math on that.
Yeah.
2.4 full days, like no sleep days.
Also, is
24-hour days, so almost.
Is that all new episodes?
Yeah,
like, did we produce that much content this year?
I did the math on that as well, and I believe that we would produce conservatively, if it was 80-minute shows twice a week for 48 weeks, which we're at this point, conservatively, that's what producer Maria and producer Anders would like, but we don't listen to them. It would be in the region of 7,500 minutes a year. So Noah was impressive. Then Noah Castle Young hit me up in my DMs.
Wait, so there's 2 Noahs.
2 Noahs.
2 Noahs.
2 Noahs.
2 by 2.
I'm not faking this. He sent me the screenshot. You listened to Extra Time for 13,003 minutes in 2023. The year is not done. You're a top 0.05% fan. That means more than 9 24-hour days this year, Noah Castle Young was listening to this podcast. That means he likely listened to either every show twice or every show plus all of last year's shows.
Love that.
That's incredible. And before you think, well, what's Noah Castle Young doing with his time? Remember, we did that with our time. We produced that content.
I wasn't ready for that. That
correct.
Hurt.
Yeah.
That hurt.
Was
yeah.
So all the minutes
I thought about that on the first one.
All the minutes that everybody else is saying, well, I listened to this minute. It's like, whoa, that's insane. That's amazing that you are giving that amount of your life to listen to Major League Soccer, chuckle blanks. That's probably being a little bit harsh.
Yeah. I mean, not undeserved.
A couple friends talk about the league that they love.
I wonder how much.
Twice a week.
I wonder how much he listened to MLS Today last year with David. We got to get that back. It sounds like you would be big with the Noah community.
Someone's missing out, so they needed to re-add in Extra Time.
I mean, it's incredible. I did listen to old episodes, dated episodes of Extra Time way back in the day, in like the 2010, 2011 years when I was working from afar as a freelancer in Kansas City. I listened to episodes that were not relevant anymore because I was a sicko in that way. So I'm so happy to know that the legacy lives on. From one Noah to another, and any other
biblical
listener with any other name out there.
Third child, Noah.
I might have to. Oh, let's knock on wood.
Methuselah community, maybe.
Knock on wood. We're trying to. If we go third, we like to have a girl. So, no offense to the Noahs.
Noah can be whatever you want.
Yeah, maybe Maria.
Yeah,
that sounds like a decent name.
Okay.
All right, let's get into it. Cincy Columbus, 6 p.m. Eastern.
We're not
MLS
doing
Season Pass,
45 minutes on Thomas Chancalay right off the top.
Well,
designated player signing. Because MLS never ends.
Thomas Chancalay or Tom Barlow to the Chicago Fire.
And rumors around Dixon Arroyo.
I don't know if there's... I guess there are rumors.
The stove is hot.
It's burning.
Yeah.
Get your hot cocoa ready.
Tom Bogert actually skipped Thanksgiving just to report on that Tom Barlow story.
You've been chasing that news down for a while. Spent the last couple weeks trying to get the Tom Barlow news. Tom Barlow reportedly to the Fire.
I think Tommy Scoops has got the new Sounders DP for what it's worth.
Oh, does he?
Ooh.
Does Tommy Scoops know that you're scooping Tommy Scoops?
Just get scooped on his scoop by
you? Don't trust the wrong people, Tommy. That's what's up. Cincinnati, Columbus. Let's get into it. We're going to start with the big story, the vibes, the narrative, if you will. Hell is real. Rivalry in the conference finals. We don't get this many times. We did the sort of mental cataloging, Doyle. We really only came up with one true rivalry in a conference final. What was it?
It was back in 2016, Montreal versus Toronto, the Canadian Classique. That rivalry match, or matches, because it was two legs back then, happened 2 years in a row in the playoffs in 2015. And then in 2016, but only in 2016 was it in the conference final. If you think back over the history of MLS, obviously been a lot of great conference finals, but like that great in 2003, I think it was San Jose, LA Galaxy matchup that came in the semifinals. The early Metro Stars, DC stuff, that was the rivalry back in the day. That came early in the playoffs. So this is it, right? Like
Portland and Seattle have met, but they've never done it in the conference final.
2018, I think.
2018 was the conference final, no?
I thought that was the conference semi.
We double checked this with producer Anders. If he is wrong,
my bad. When was
that is a cardinal
Zarek
sin.
Explaining?
I thought that was a conference semis, but now I'm googling it right now.
Would they be in the conference finals in 2018? It would be great if we had known this before we got here.
Well, you rely on a Sounders fan, and this is what you get. Nope. Portland Tim.
Point when we were doing the previews, like this is basically in Leagues Cup, or it could happen in CONCACAF Champions Cup, but like the chances of that are very, very small. This is the biggest stage for Hell is Real, and it's extra spicy because Cincy are great this year. They already won the Supporters Shield. They went far in Open Cup as well. They are, playing to be remembered as one of the best teams in MLS history. If you 69 points and a double, then you are in that conversation. And of course, Lucho was the best player over the course of the year. Over the course of the last couple of months, Cucho's been the best player in the league, other than maybe Bouanga, who has an argument on both of those. So it's like there's all of this is coming together to produce what I'm really hopeful is not a 0-0 draw.
Oh, and by the way, to up the stakes just a little bit more, whoever wins hosts MLS Cup.
Right.
So it's not just to go to MLS Cup. It is to host MLS Cup, to give yourself pole position, to win a championship, to have your rival in the rearview mirror on the way there. I got to give credit to my guy, John Zadar, who hit me up with, I was talking to him. He's a Tifo Sweat OG in Columbus, basically. And I was like, hey, what are you thinking about this game? And he said, I think this is as big as it gets.
Yeah.
So full credit to him for sort of guiding us to that big picture narrative.
Are there Crew fans in Cincinnati, like from before they existed?
Yes, I believe so.
Cincinnati, right, and you're an original MLS fan, then the Crew is almost certainly your team from the jump.
FC Cincinnati becoming what they are was that 2017 Open Cup run, which starts with beating the Crew.
Right.
And there's a great section of Crew fans at Nippert Stadium of yellow, and then FC Cincinnati, that's the first MLS team they beat. Then they go on to beat the Fire after that, which I think was one of the big moments of like going from, oh, this is a fun thing to like, oh, this thing's going to continue to grow.
Commissioner Don Garber was at those games.
Yeah.
It is pretty...
There's a straight line from those crowds to Cincinnati getting into MLS. The other thing I want to point out here is like, there is actually antipathy and animosity between these fan bases, even though there's presumably some overlap in terms of Cincinnati-based folks who used to be part of Crew supporters groups, maybe, or certainly.
There had to have been overlap when Cincy were in USL, where it wasn't just a one-time switch. There had to have been Cincinnati people.
a lot of those Philly fans were OG DC United fans. And because of that, there's just a lot of respect and a lot of ties between Sons of Ben and Screaming Eagles and Barra Brava. It's never really developed into the type of, hey, we hate you and you hate us, and that makes us hate you, even these two teams. Like, there's some real mean shit being said about each other online, and frankly, you'll love to see it.
It is interesting because these teams aren't, not teams, these cities aren't traditional rivals, right?
I think they are.
Yeah,
I think
I think
their
in
culture
I don't know.
is
I
very
asked the
Yeah.
Columbus folks, and I think there is an element of that, but at
Yeah.
least sporting terms, it's more about Cincinnati, Cleveland, because Columbus hasn't had direct
different.
competitors.
Yeah, because you don't have
Oh,
an NFL
college.
team. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
I think Cincinnati, again, this is according to Columbus folks. Cincinnati folks might think that, differently. Have sort of
My understanding, which comes, I think, a little bit jaded because I think it's a lot of people who are like Kentucky into Cincinnati. There's like a cultural difference between the two. In terms of sports, yeah, Bengals and Browns would probably.
guys,
There you go.
go back to the early 60s in college basketball.
Yeah,
That's where it's at.
I have no idea
What
about
about-
that history.
what about last weekend in the Big 12, Cincy fans, huh? How you like that?
Oh, boy.
Jason
cares.
Bean running it down your throats. That's
no
what's
one
up.
cares. Exciting. It's going to be fun. It's going to have a special energy, as you guys talked about. And then you throw the soccer side in, right? Of like Nansei and Noonan, and two clubs that I think are going to be here for a while. They are not like flash in the pan, and they are not at the end of like, we have to win now. When you look at the age of Cucho, or even just Nagby and Diego Rose, we think Miazga will be there for a while. Celentano will probably be a part of this. Then you have more pieces coming in.
Williams too. I know we're going to be in Cincinnati. TQL looks incredible. Haven't been. Would love to go to MLS Cup. Lore.com looks just as awesome.
Yeah, it's good.
I've only seen it out of a hotel room window on a cross country trip from Kansas to New Jersey.
Oh, you
I'd love
didn't
to
get
go there, too.
no one wanted to take the tour during the drive?
No. It was a little chilly outside. Stress levels were
Nice. I went there for Campeones
slightly
Cup.
getting for Dos Aceros, or what we hoped would be, and Mexico unfortunately lost that one. Barely remember. But yeah, it's excellence, and it's not just the players, it's the front offices. It's the decision to bring in Chris Albright, to hire Pat Noonan. Tim Bezpachenko just continues to build incredible projects. The state of Ohio seems pretty securely at the top of the Eastern Conference, and like it'll be there for a long time. Now,
And just to add, if I was a betting man, I would say in 3 years, the conversation we have about Albright coming from Philly, we'll talk about Columbus and Cincinnati of like, oh, this guy's an Albright disciple. This guy's a Tim Bezpachenko.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like there could be 4 GMs across the league in the next 3 years that came out of these clubs. And then you add in coaches as well. Obviously, Laurent Courtois, his experience, Johan Demay's under
Yep.
Nansei as well. Tree clubs that everyone else based off.
timing is everything in a championship season. Timing is tough for FC Cincinnati right now.
Yeah.
So Obina Nwobodo has been in and out of training, not participating fully. It is very cold in Cincinnati. There's been some element of like training indoors. So there is that. He got stepped on the foot in that Red Bulls series, and that's been the issue for him so far. He didn't even make the bench against the Philadelphia Union. Pat Noonan has said that they were sort of cautious on that they thought he might be able to leading up to, but when he couldn't make the bench for that game, what is it to think that he could start a game a week later of this magnitude? It's hard to believe that. Santi Arias is back in full training and was available off the bench, so maybe he's available for Cincinnati. But the big one continues to be Matt Miazga, who was suspended against the Union for yellow card accumulation, 3 yellow cards. There was an investigation announced. The investigation is still ongoing. Witten got the latest news this morning, and it's going through due process at this time, and MLS will share an update from the Disco once that's available. There is a real possibility that this rival with a trip to MLS Cup on the line.
I would argue it's 2 best 11 players missing. It's already the defender of the year if Matt Miazga's out missing. They survived versus Philly. It's a whole different challenge. The pressure Columbus will put on you defensively is different than what Philly's capable of, and especially Philly last week with Carranza coming back from injury and being rusty and all those things. And so it's going to be a whole new challenge. And as you said, very often in these moments, it's who's hitting the right. Shuffled their way past 2 rounds. They are the home team. They are going to be favorites, whether those guys are in the lineup or not coming into this game. But it's as big a loss as it can be. And Mosquera played really well in the last game. He obviously pops up with the goal, but I think it's less Mosquera and it's more the other guys that have to step into
It's the
team.
trickle down.
Yeah, and it's lack of depth now. A week, you play a week, then you come back into this one. Who's behind Kubo? If Kubo has to start again with Junior Moreno in central midfield, Who's behind Ray Gaddis? Who's behind Alvis Powell? You pick up early yellow cards. What are your other options? It starts to chop down the available players and the players that you trust in a team, and takes away the high-level talent, which is one of the things Cincinnati has in all these matchups. Is they probably have 6 of the best 8 players on the field in most of the games they play in the playoffs. That starts to go away when you lose Miazga and Nwobodo.
The other thing I'll just sort of throw out there, and we don't know anything. We just know it's ongoing. There's a decision to be made. They're in due process. Based on what has been reported and talked about by Pat Noonan and others, I would posit that there's a possibility that it wouldn't just be one game if he is indeed suspended for the conference final. It could even be MLS Cup if they get there. The price of that decision to get the third yellow and then everything that happened afterwards could be massive for Cincinnati. Pat Noonan has to deal with it. He's got to put a team out that can win, Doyle. What does that 11 look like for you?
I think you might want to just run it back. Do what worked against Philadelphia, and it's a different game. Scratching out a result and against a Columbus team that is more about possession and more about throwing numbers forward from kind of odd angles. They attack really effectively and kind of distinctly from within the league, and that's where I think the biggest miss is going to be Miazga if he doesn't play, because a veteran, a leader, vocally, an organizer, that's why they got him. More than just the physical stuff or the distribution, it's very loud and very clear and very quick with his organizational commands, and against a team like Columbus who hit you from different angles all the time. Man, that would be a very big miss, and it puts a ton of pressure on Mascara, a ton of pressure on Alvis Powell if he's starting, because again, no Nick Hagglund. He is the goal against the Union. He's a good player, but he's also a target when the ball is on his foot for opposing teams to pressure. It limits the Cincinnati team in a very real way.
Look at in the previous game against Philly, a game that you thought was probably going to go to extra time, played at a high intensity level. Cincinnati made 2. Arias, obviously as a starter, did not play. That's a health thing. Past Arias, your next option is Sergio Santos, another forward.
Right.
The other 4 subs on the bench are FC Cincinnati 2 players, which was the second worst team in MLS Next Pro, and or our academy kids. So, are you going to play Malik Pinto and London Aghetto in this game? No.
Yeah.
They don't have options. They don't have choices, and they don't have depth. Now, if Arias comes back in, now you have a decision you can make.
Right.
If Arias is back, do you play Ray Gaddis as the right center back, or do you play Alvis Powell there if Miazga is suspended and Arias comes back? And I think that's a legitimate decision that Pat Noonan and his staff will have to make.
And it does give them a little bit of flexibility to play into Philly's diamond at all. And you don't particularly want to play into a diamond. You want to stretch it out and, break it with long diagonals. They weren't really able to do that either. But the thing that Miazga in particular is very good at doing when building from the back is hitting those third, hopefully, Albino Nwobodo. Without that, it becomes very linear, very direct for a Cincinnati team that I think, look, they can do the direct thing. They've done it really well for 2 years. And I worry that without Miazga, if he's not going to play, without Nwobodo, if he's unable to get out there and be 100%.
Really was without having someone coming forward along the right side. It felt like Lucho and Barreal took too much focus.
What you mean you're not impressed by Ray Gaddis's attacking contributions?
In the first half of the last game, he didn't even try. It was much better in the second half. There's a clear intent coming out of halftime. Lucho went over to some of their pressing moments because Lucho was slightly out of position. Now let's flip to Columbus Orlando, where 80% of the Columbus attack comes down that left channel towards Schlegel in that game. That's going to be Powell or Gaddis and Arias, healthy or not healthy, whatever it is. Yeboah, he's out there to attack, right? Diego Rossi loves to take that left channel. Cucho
from this year in Major League Soccer, 3-2 early on in Cincinnati. Cincinnati jumped out to a 2-0 lead. Crew came back. Salantanian was fueled by an error by Patrick Schulte. Of course, Schulte was much better, was, perhaps even in game winner territory against Orlando, or at least game preserver. So 3-0 in Columbus. Now, Matt Miazga didn't play in that game. It was Haglund, Murphy, and Gaddis in that three-man back line with Powell at right center back. And the Baji game, which is what we talked about after that first Hell is Real, where he went to the end line and flipped over the boards, but had the assist to Acosta, and then drew a penalty and almost set up another goal that was eventually offside, though the ball hit the back, who is more direct and maybe better at playing behind and through a crew back line that has been a little shaky in those moments.
There's a strong argument for Don Baji because whether Miazga's out there or not, the ability to lump a ball into the channel and have him run it down and put some fear into that crew back line, because it's not just the wing backs who get forward. Steven Moreira and Malte Amundsen, the outside center backs, they'll both get forward too. Baji's directness and ability to get there, that is a strong argument.
It's a shortcut to isolation, basically.
It absolutely is. Boupendza's a better player. Boupendza's the guy, and he's already shown it in the playoffs. He showed it against the Red Bulls. Now, he was not good against Philadelphia. He, time after time after time, he got on the ball and was not. It is a neutral. I kind of appreciate that. I think I would have got on the field. You're already down 2 match winners if Nwodo and Miazga can't go. You can't limit yourself.
It's also not the same at some point. If you play high enough up the field, Boupendza, you want there to take advantage of that at a minimum. Then you add in the fact that the pressure he can put on Moreira and Adminson and maybe Pulmo, Farsian and all those people affects the way Columbus can get forward. But when you play the crew, you need to be able to score because you're not going to shut them out. It's just, even as close as Orlando got, you're not going to shut them out. It's not going to happen. And so Boupendza's there for that reason. And then you have Don Baji to come off the bench. You have Sergio Santos out of the scoring load on Brandon Vasquez, who hasn't been that guy this year. And so I understand.
Could you play Baji instead of Brandon Vasquez?
I don't think you're sitting Brandon Vasquez at this point.
Okay, I'm just throwing out possibilities because Vasquez
you
is
want to
not
play Malik Pinto at center
exactly
forward?
been,
We could just throw everything up.
I'm channeling my inner Kalen.
Brianna Pinto.
I am trying to advocate for my guy Don Baji.
It's great. He's a great part of the team back and being able to nod that ball back across the box. That's a threat, right? If it was him and Vasquez, they are probably going to win most aerial 50-50s in the box against the center backs or Patrick Schulte. So you create a lot of problems.
I other think he also just doesn't have the same tendency that Boupendza does to just drift into the space that Barreal and Lucho wants between Lucho and Boupendza as well. In that left channel, they mostly haven't included Barreal. So that's the only sort of thought that I have in the sense that Baji will, at Adminson or whoever it is, make himself available to get in isolation, push the crew back line back, give space for Lucho to make that second run and occupy a run in the box where he can finish. Probably just early chemistry issues. I don't know. They'll probably go with Boupendza. And then Baji will be a good option off the bench. Yeah. But these are the questions that Pat Noonan has to ask himself when it's 90 minutes to go to MLS Cup.
I mean, credit to Philadelphia. A lot of teams seem to have attacking chemistry. What we saw from Boupendza in this, in the conference semifinals, I thought down the stretch of the regular season, I thought the chemistry between Boupendza and Lucho in particular was very good. And I think I lean more towards that being the real
plus
attacking.
The Red Bull second leg or second
first half because Baji got hurt,
right?
Didn't he? Yeah. So I get your point, Weeby, and it's not
and we've talked about this a lot in the West with LAFC of like afford to put a DP on the bench for not a bad, but like a galaxy brain tactical idea for Don Baji.
And the other thing is like Brandon Vasquez runs into the channels. He's not as fast as Don Baji, but he's actually better once he gets into those channels, and he could do more things in terms of like his ability to knock balls down for whether it's Boupendza or Lucho pushing forward to win a second ball. And Brandon Vasquez is one of his biggest strengths as a striker.
Significant ego management play here for Pat Noonan as well.
Weeby, you need a tissue? You're struggling there.
There's a cough button you could have just hit while you did that.
What did I do? Oh, did I? Oh, I'm sorry. I've been struggling for a little while now.
I'm glad we're in an enclosed place.
I warned you. I warned you 2 weeks ago.
That was like a year ago.
It was. Now I've lost my train of thought. Oh, with Boupendza, of just the last month he's been on. It's been weird. He's made it weird on his own. Coming back
situation, it
a
makes
record
it weird.
Fee.
He's an honorary member of Extra Time. This is a partner in soccer.
He's a record fee. Like he's your future. So biggest game of the year to go to MLS Cup. Probably just got to play him. All right, coach versus coach. How about we focus on Wilfred here? Because we gave a lot to Patrick Noonan, the decision he has to make. Wilfred Nancy, what are you thinking about? What is he thinking about ahead of this matchup?
I think he has less lineup decisions to make because Mo Farsi, it seems like, has established himself. Most likely, I guess one would be Oddmanson at left wing back or left center back. Do you play Zwadsky at left center back? Do you push Oddmanson out wide? That's what he did at Atlanta in the second game of the first round, which was a road game. Then he brought Yayaboa back in for the game at Orlando. So that's a slight decision he has to make. And then the last one would be, does he bring Christian Ramirez back into the starting lineup because he scores the goal? Just also, I think what Christian Ramirez said, which clearly came from Wilfred Nancy, of like, he brings something different. Matan, Rossi, and Cucho take up similar areas. I don't think that will be the same issue against Cincinnati because I think the game will be a little bit more open and it will be less packed in around the 18, trying to pass it around and everyone's trying to play the same slip pass. And so I think the three attackers that started against Orlando make sense in this game. And then Ramirez comes off the bench as a target forward option. Maybe if Miazga doesn't play, it shifts your thinking a little bit because now Christian Ramirez can maybe dominate matchups with an Alvis Powell or a Ray Gaddis or Mosquera, if those are the, center back options in this game. But I think for the most part, that stuff's simple. I think what's keeping him up at night is, one, the play where Duncan McGuire plays Ivan Angulo through. Mm-hmm. And how does he close things down centrally, whether it's one of the two forwards dropping or Lucho finding that space for a through ball into the channel when his team gets higher up the field. And as good as Aiden Morris was in the previous match against Orlando, it's a different challenge dealing with the MVP who's out there to be an attacking mid. Mauricio Pereira wasn't out there to do that in the last game. So Columbus now has to deal with a new challenge of how do they protect their back line. And I think that's what's going to keep him up at night. It's going to keep him up in terms of he knows that they have to push numbers forward to create chances against a good FC Cincinnati defense. How does his back three or back two or whatever it looks like in those moments deal with Cincinnati in transition? I think that's what's going to really worry Columbus. But the decisions of we know how they're going to play, right? They've gone into 4 playoff games and they've tried to play the same way every time. And credit to them, that's one of their strengths.
That's what Nance said earlier this year. I remember he was asked by one of the local reporters, how do you prepare for a different team? And he says, I don't. I prepare my team.
So sick.
Right? So good. They don't have the same patterns of play that like a Seattle do or LAFC under Bob Bradley. They had very rigid patterns of play. It's a little different. You go over here, blah, blah, blah. And so you end up seeing similar stuff no matter whether they're playing against a 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1 or 3-5-2. And they've had a one or anything like that. I think they know what they're about. And I think what we've seen from them throughout these playoffs is that they're super confident about their ability to execute it. Now, they can get caught. They can throw too many numbers forward. I think if that kept Wilfred Nancy up at night, we would have seen a change from them already. And I think that the reason we haven't is because he knows that's their best. I mean, that is their best chance of winning games is to attack in extra time against Orlando City when Patrick Schulte had to stand on his head. And Patrick Schulte is a good young goalkeeper with a bright future. I don't think you want him doing that 2 weeks in a row.
Now, on the Schulte thing, I think we have to say, because we talked about it as a weakness and then his strength in that game, it's a different skill set to be a shot stopper and then controlling your box and playing with your feet. And so
we've said that all year.
Right,
about
he
Patrick
is
Schulte.
good at that part. He's a good shot stopper.
He's a very good shot stopper.
He struggles to come out and play. And what we saw in the previous matchup with Cincinnati, the chance he gives up, he's coming off his line trying to play the ball. That's where Lucho takes it, in a low block. So if they don't have the ball and it's not high up the field and they're not using it, similar to what we'll talk about with Houston,
some sort of mental block there for them as well, where I know Wilfred says, hey, we have to control games with the ball late to finish games off. But against Orlando, they lost control of the game.
Yeah.
They weren't able to maintain that.
Now, and it's not unusual, right? We see it all the time. Teams go up one, by 2% while the other team ratchets up the intensity by 5 or 10%. And even if you're a man down, you can take control of the game. And so it's not unusual to see that. But the crew, they got away with it in Orlando. I don't think you get away with that twice in a row, not against a Cincy team with this kind of firepower.
1% possession in Columbus.
You just said in Columbus twice.
Sorry, well, Cincy was the first one. Columbus was the second one. Ever since the cough comment, I'm just rattled.
Oh god,
I'm rattled. All right, let's finish this one off here. Star Spotlight. Who's more likely to win the game for their team, Lucho or Cucho?
Oof. I couldn't pick one. That's what's fun. That's what's exciting. I'll say Lucho because I think what he brings to the field, although Barreal does it as well, than what the other player profiles are for Cincinnati. And I think in this matchup, with the way Aiden Morris and Darlington Nagbe have to be involved in the attack and the way they step in, he's going to find some gaps and has to be dangerous. They have gotten this far without Lucho. If Lucho doesn't play and have a similar effect on the game as he did in the first half of the season, I just don't think you can go to an MLS Cup.
I think that's all correct. I just question whether or not Lucho can have that kind of game if Miazga and Nwobodo are missing. And all things being equal, if Cincinnati was reasonably healthy, if they were missing one or two starters instead of three, and lead his team to MLS Cup, but the Crew don't have any injuries. They have more depth, being able to bring on a true number 9 and change the game. And Cucho is then just as comfortable being a setup man as he is being a finisher.
Christian Ramirez's chemistry with Cucho this entire season has been elite.
He's on the t-shirt.
Like insane. Those two just seem to kind of have a great understanding of where the other one wants to. That's a huge tool off the bench. No doubt about it.
Yeah, so I kind of lean towards the Crew and Cucho, but who knows if Nwobodo and Miazga are both available in this game from the start, then I reserve the right to change my choice.
If in Orlando just scramble defense and finishing wasn't there, I mean, Cucho
falls.
There goes.
I don't want to lose the ball here.
There goes efficiency. Then when you get the opportunity, find a way to get the shot off. They couldn't against Orlando. Without Miazga, can this back line
that's
match what the Lions
were
able to do in those scramble moments? And that's
the full healthy first choice back line for this Cincinnati team. You'd say, yeah, they could do exactly what Orlando did. They've been doing it all season long, and those reads that Janssen was making, but also Dagger Dan getting back, and I thought Santos was good at left back. Their ability to work and be connected, it was tough. It's the team as good in the attack as Columbus are, without their first choice players. It's hard to imagine Cincinnati doing that for the full 90 minutes.
So one thing I'd add, and it's tough because both these teams are coming in as completely different opponents than what the other teams just faced. But Cincinnati came out and was on Cincinnati's defensive third as Orlando played. So that takes away some of the Janssen having to scramble and make blocks because everything's happening in his own box. Cincinnati will play higher up the field. They have more of a threat going the other way. So the game states there will be a little bit different of Mosquera doesn't have to play that game for them to get a result.
I still think the Crew like that. I mean, they fancy themselves to create against any sort of tactical approach. But if you come out and extend your lines a little bit,
I think it might be better for Columbus.
Yeah, that. If I'm Wilfred Nancy, I'm like, cool.
That's the dream scenario for Columbus, and it happened maybe one time against Orlando because they sat too deep, and Cincinnati won't do that.
Get us started, Dave.
Which team am I doing X Factor on?
Anyway, it doesn't matter.
I'll do Columbus. I'll say Aiden Morris because to me, he has the biggest variance of performance that we've seen in the star spots for Columbus. Of he can elevate his game like we saw in 2010, 2020 MLS Cup against Orlando, be one of the best players, win the ball, help lead the counter press, keep the ball in the attacking half. He scored an unbelievable goal against Cincinnati last time they faced off. But there's a bigger gap there. I think Cucho's in a similar situation. Rossi's probably there as well. Matan maybe even. So that to me is an X factor because there's variance there and it's a need. Whether Nwobodo's on the field or not, Aiden Morris needs to be elite for Columbus to be able to dominate midfield, protect their back line, keep the ball where they want to, lose it in areas they're comfortable with, and then start the counter press. So I think Aiden Morris is one of the keys to the game.
And you think who will host MLS Cup?
I don't know what that means. You go to do the X Factor on the other side. Well, I
think Brandon Vasquez is the X Factor. He was not good in the regular season, but he was good in Leagues Cup. He was good in U.S. Open Cup. He was good in the Gold Cup for the U.S. men's national team. It seems like he has showed up in a big way in big games this year and to sort of run over the top into space and get at Steven Moreira. That's on the table for him. And I think he excels in those situations. He's got to meet the moment, and he generally has this year. That said, I'm picking Columbus to get it done on the road. I just think the
season, since he was, even if one of Wobodo or Miazga was in, I would still hold the Cincy pick. I'm going to go with the Crew.
Wow. So last time you both went Orlando and I went Columbus.
I didn't remember that, but you certainly have.
Yeah. I'm going to go Cincinnati, and I will be stoked for whichever team wins.
100%.
I think MLS Cup's going to be great in both markets. There's a lot that excites me about both these clubs, which I think we talked about at the top. But I'll take the atmosphere of what it's meant for Cincinnati. And I think you have these star players that can elevate on Monday. This is not the same matchup. And then you add in the fact that you have an MVP on the field. We didn't talk about Barrial.
Yeah, we haven't.
Like, I like Mo Farsi a lot. And it's going to be a challenge for Barrial to deal with him. And Farsi basically is a center back playing out there with what he can do. And he'll come inside and he'll attack. So now does Barrial track him? Does he trade him off? There's a lot of question marks there. But Alvaro Barrial, teams don't do well when they mirror them. Cincinnati's not mirroring Columbus. This is who Cincinnati is. And
that week of the year. You know why? Because we can spend like 40 minutes on
each
one game.
Yeah.
Just digging deep. Cincinnati hosting Columbus. Hell is real. 6 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday. MLS season pass. Houston stream will have an hour post-game into pre-game for that match. It's at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time on season pass. Big story, vibes, narrative. LAFC going for the two-peat, or maybe being branded chokers in the biggest moments, at least in this year. For LAFC, what would a win and a trip to Cup mean?
We talk about them as having one of the best 2-year runs in MLS history. I don't think it would be at the top of the heap, but if you go double and then back it up with another MLS Cup and then trips to the final in CCL and a good performance in Campeones Cup, couldn't quite get over the hump though. Good performance in the Leagues Cup, couldn't get there are 29 teams in the league that would kill to have these years back to back. Like that is up there with the Galaxy in 2011, 2012.
Just to have one of the final appearances. Yeah. Forget about back to back years.
And I don't buy the like even if they lose this game, they're not chokers this year. They played 55 games or something like that across all competitions this season. They've played a ton, and they've done it while trying to move from one generation to another of players. Like it's clearly Dennis Bouanga's team now and Steve Cherundolo's team in a way that it wasn't last year. Carlos Vela is playing a new position.
I mean, Kellen Acosta is not a full-time starter. He was a linchpin last year.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much that got moved out of this team, and for them to compete at the level they've competed across all these competitions.
It's already a successful season for LAFC. Now, they won't feel that way. They are the favorites. They have, God, as great as Houston is, I think we would all...
Don't bring that up and not do it. Who's your first five? Who are you taking off the Dynamo?
For Houston?
Yeah.
I think it's the 3 center mids.
Yeah. Though Carrasquilla now plays as the right
whatever, but then Bossi's in there as well. Those 4 players. I don't know, maybe Steve Clark in there as well.
Okay, so we're gonna go Denny Bouanga. How are we measuring these? This is just straight talent.
I don't know. What we're firing off from the hip.
I think you got to throw
right now this year.
I mean, Carlos Vela has 2 goals in 10 career playoff appearances.
And how many? You put Vela third?
I just was throwing names out there.
This is fun. But it's not the real conversation. The real conversation is, do you believe in LAFC's ability to nullify what the Dynamo LAFC all year long against MLS competition is? Yes. Yes, they absolutely have the ability to do that. So while I think man for man, you could argue Ache, Carrasquilla, and Artur over any of them can come up with. It's like Cherundolo's game model. I don't love it because it's not pretty, but it is so effective, and because it's effective because you get chances like the one Bouanga scored at Seattle.
This tactical matchup is the most interesting of the two because I think it's the most variable. There's a question mark as to what the Dynamo will do. There's not as much one as to what LAFC would like to do. though they may be forced into a position of having most of the ball in this game. Let's stay on the big story and vibes. Let's turn to the Dynamo, Dave. Playing with house money here. Like, nobody expected them to be here. Ben Olsen said as much, but this is a huge shot. Anytime you're in a position to win a championship, you got 2 games to do it. Yes, they're on the road. They've struggled there. But I was thinking about it as we put this show together. Open Cup beating Messi. I mean, beating anybody, but beating Messi in Miami. And if they could, forget the double. Keep that in sort of the ideal situation part of your mind. But even just making MLS Cup final, we threw some names out there. 2000 to 2001 San Jose. San Jose had missed the playoffs for 4 straight years, then went and won.
They
MLS
won
Cup
the
in
wooden
01.
spoon in 2000.
Donovan, etc.
If Houston go from being merely a bad team, but not a wooden spoon winner last year, to winning the double, I don't think that trumps literally worse.
Yeah, but what was San Jose? 8th in winning the
Like
wooden
12th.
spoon?
Yeah, like 12.
Yeah. Where Houston was worse in the standings last year than San Jose because there are more teams.
They were at like 0.8 points per game. Like, they were truly, they were wretched.
So I think they're both similar. Do you want to name your other one?
Yeah, the other ones were, we threw out like 14 to 15 Portland, but it was just a missed playoff to then winning MLS Cup, and they had a big run at the end of the year, if I remember right. So it wasn't like they were some elite team in the regular season. I don't know if the Dynamo were that, but they were in the cup. That might be the one, but either way, this is potentially historic for the Dynamo, and just an incredible turnaround.
And I think for Houston, what the convo is like, it's not just 1 year. It was 4 years of buildup of like, and even before that with Elise, where there was huge question marks of like, what is the purpose of this club? What is the focus? They got Elise, they got Kyoto, they found some talent, Manotas, but it didn't feel sustainable. It didn't feel like they built to get better each year. Once Elise was gone, it felt like there was kind of no future, including under new management last year, where they had to fire their Ache comes in, has stated now, didn't understand sort of the requirements, wasn't really committed, wasn't really a part of it. Like, all of it was such a mess. And while Cincinnati didn't win anything last year, it's closer to the worst MLS team ever to competitive. Now for Houston, they won a cup already. And if they were intimacy to the argument of just the sustained run of struggle coming into this year, and then in a 1 game to go and win MLS Cup or go to MLS Cup. And I think that's when you talk like, let's go be ourselves.
Yeah.
You have nothing to lose.
That's what. So this is what I was saying to we and did to LAFC what LAFC did to Seattle last weekend. They had like 25% of the ball.
29%.
29% of the ball.
Second lowest percentage possession
It was
against LAFC.
Classic 2014 DC United Benny Ball performance. And maybe that is the pragmatic thing to do because you don't get exposed on those quick transitions and you don't give Bouanga the type of space that he has just ripped teams apart. But like, you're into the conference final. You have shown the ability to beat basically everyone when you play the way you have that we talked about on Monday's show. Go out and do it. Go out.
Can't you still have those moments and do some of those things, but not in totality? Can't you balance the risk reward and still choose your moments to build from deep or to win a second ball
so
and to have numbers around the ball?
Open Cup final, they had like 42% possession by the end in total.
That's fair.
But most of the first half, they were who they wanted to be until they had the lead. And then they sat in a little bit more and played on the counter.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. And that does go to the desperation thing.
It wouldn't be what I do, by the way.
Right.
I was just helping Weeby.
And
I don't need
so
that
there's always
but I appreciate that.
There's always going to be some of that balance, but there's also, I don't want to say an inevitability but like the way Houston played this past weekend, you could see it demoralizing Sporting KC for good chunks of the game. Now, Houston doesn't have, Quinones is super talented. He makes the wrong decision in the final third every time. Corey Barrett has had a good year. He is not an elite goal-scoring match winner at this level, I don't think. So they leave the door open. But man, when they start knocking the ball around like that, you could see the spirit go out of the other team. And when teams, especially at home, get a little desperate like that, there's something to be said
Yeah.
for that beyond just what happens in the box score.
And you have players who are in the team because their individual skill sets are geared towards that. Don't make Griffin Dorsey sit back and defend in a low block for long segments of time. Don't make Amin Bassi close down consistently off the ball. Don't make Coco Carrasquillo go out wide and have to deal with Palacios charging at him. Take the game, put your guys in their comfort zone, and play on the front foot. And I go back to...
But isn't it more likely that you're putting, for instance, Coco Carrasquillo in positions to have to defend in that way when you are expansive and provide more space
No.
for LAFC to run
No,
into?
you defend high. You counter press when you lose the
No,
ball.
and I agree
in
with that
attacking
part of it.
positions.
I agree with that part of it.
So,
But here was the game plan in LA. Went back and watched long stretches of the game.
for sure, that was 5 months
Okay.
ago, 6 months ago.
Okay. Think about this game for the Houston Dynamo.
I would hope not. I would hope that you felt under a new coach with some new players that you have moved from, well, that was in May,
That was in June.
June, Cup final, and the way you went and played.
Okay,
at a
so
team.
let's start to paint the picture.
Can I just throw one other reference
Go for
point in there? And it's not perfect. Last year's Western Conference Finals, Austin was the expansive possession team. They ended up 48% possession. LAFC ran them off the field. It never felt like Austin was in that game because, to what Doyle said, they never really put their stamp on the game. They never played their soccer. These are two different clubs with two different teams.
There was a massive talent mismatch.
Yes, hoping that you're still at 0-0 when you can sort of get your feet, get your legs under you, or maybe get to
I
halftime.
think this game's going to go. What percent possession do you think the Houston Dynamo will have?
29%.
It won't be 29%.
Oh, in this game?
Yeah.
I think Houston will be at 52.
I'll take the under.
I'll take the under. I'll take.
I didn't set it on a half, so if this
Yes.
pushes, I'm not paying you guys.
I'll take Houston in the 42 to 45 range.
Yeah. I think you're right. And I don't want to see it play out that way. I want the Houston that we saw this past weekend. But for as beautiful as it is when Ache is getting all over the ball and running like a Madrid player, so 40% is just fine with him. To your point, like, he knows how to still make the game in those moments, even when his team is playing most of the time against
I know they won 4-0 in Houston. I just don't think if it turns into
toss that one.
I
Can
know.
you toss both of them?
fine.
Can
But
you
if it's an
stop
open
referencing
game,
May
if it's an
result?
open game, I'm not betting on the Dynamo. Like I don't think we'll have a chance to win if it's
Such weakness inside of you.
more than 50% possession. They lost 7 of those games.
Okay.
LAFC, between possession and winning for these teams, for LAFC, it's not with having
It's
the ball.
inverted.
It's not with having the ball.
And that's something that we've seen league-wide this year. Over the 15 years or so, the correlation between possession and points per game just kept... I want to say that some of the better teams in the league tend to be stronger possession sides, but also some of the teams in the league that play purely on the counter or through high press, which is what LAFC are best at, or via transitions.
Are from a group that was either playing differently or different personnel of like Olivero, Maxime Crepeau.
Sure.
They were not in that team. Tillman and I don't think Kellen had one of the big advantages I think LAFC has to, I think the way Doyle said it with LAFC is like the 3 central midfielders, if Kellen starts, which I think he will, are suited to battle there where SKC wasn't.
No, I agree.
Like SKC does not have the personnel to close space, make life hard. And so while I think Houston will have a ton of possession, I think it will all look more like from the 20th minute on against KC, where it was deeper. And it was Ache playing along his center backs, where I don't think LAFC will extend their line there and close him down, but it's not a super dangerous area. The opening 15, 20 minutes of that previous game, Houston was in the attacking third, and all that possession was in a dangerous area. And then it slowly moved back as KC filled in a little bit more. I think that's what a lot of this game will look like.
I think Houston's going to want to be, in the same way the LAFC does, very, very focused on the repress. I don't think they're going to play a ton in LAFC's final third, but when they get there, I think they're going to want to try to use those opportunities to say, okay, we took the risk, we got the ball further up the field, we advanced our lines. Once we do that, we have to do everything in our power, be direct to goal. Find those little slip runs to Corey Baird. Don't waste that. There's going to be a huge, all those moments where the ball turns over, where either team is up the field, especially when Houston is. And that's the challenge for every team that plays Denny Bouanga. Like, it's not like you can get away from that. You're just going to have to deal with it. Find a way.
I feel like Bouanga doesn't get fouled that much for like what he's capable.
You can't catch him.
Yeah,
I know.
Who's around him?
You like almost have to foul him off the ball before the counterattack.
I was thinking of it like a cornerback, the initial bump.
Near him to try and control his ability to get out into the open field. Houston doesn't feel well geared for a lot of this. Like Griffin Dorsey is better going forward. I would say Ymar is better at center back than the two options you have. João Paulo was sitting over there, and yet Seattle still got burned on it. And so I don't love that for Houston. I think it's just the reality of this game. Just sitting on Quinones just has to be Bouanga on the other side.
That's it.
That's the game.
And you know what? We're throwing these games out, so it doesn't matter. Ignore this, but he was like the LAFC were at the top of their game mentally and physically.
You stole Anders' joke. You can.
I did.
Tough.
So Steve Cherundolo, coach versus coach here, is 6-0-0 in the playoffs. That seems good. We've already sort of talked through the Dynamo, and we've been on.
What's Ben Olsen's playoff record?
That's a good question. I don't.
It's got to be a lot of games in there.
I should have. That would have been a good one for the rundown meeting. But I'll find it. I'll find it later. Ben Olsen poured concrete shoes on Benny Ball, though he may have some elements of that. I think they'll still try to play. They'll just choose their moments. Anything? Do you want to dive into Bouanga a little bit more? Like, how do they try to spring him into space? Have we already established that, Doyle? Any tactical notes that we haven't hit so far?
No, I mean, it does come from in LAFC's build out. They immediately look to play long into the channel or directly to feet for Bouanga on one side, Oliveira on the other. Like, that is one of the few repeatable patterns of play that we see from LAFC, and it's one of the reasons they are so comfortable absorbing pressure is because they know we're 2 passes away just every single time. Houston obviously have to watch that because when it becomes a back three, Sviatchenko's been really good. I don't like his chances against Bouanga in the open field.
I don't like anybody's.
So you have to be really, really smart if you're Houston about keeping an eye on both Kellen and I think it was Tillman who hit the pass again. Yeah, those two guys, when they drop deep, like that is Velo will come underneath as well and turn the 4-3-3 into more of a 4-4-2 diamond with wide forwards.
And if you're Cherundolo up a little bit,
yeah,
Oliveira is dragging Mikael the other way. That's where it starts to get a pretty worrisome.
Yeah, just for specifically the goal scoring moment, Franco Escobar probably will be most of this game. Part of that is because Seattle was home. Like they had to push to create chances. So while Oliveira flips the field, comes to the other side, that throws Ymar off a little. It changes Reagan's spacing. Nuhu is also high up the field, and it's two where Franco Escobar probably didn't for portions of the KC game. I would assume being on the road is different. Will have rotated over, and so there's a little bit more help there for support for Sviatchenko as he goes.
You can pass Oliveira to Franco, and then Well, we'll see. Everybody's trying to stop Bouanga, and he's sitting on 37 goals, just one back of Carlos Vela on his historic season. X Factor here, I've got set pieces. They created 3 or 4 set piece opportunities there. That's where the repress comes in for me, is that you're trying to not just win the ball, but win fouls if you're the Dynamo in that area. And we know that LAFC have won games on set pieces, not just in this postseason, but last postseason. So I'll throw out Ryan Hollingshead as an X Factor here and his ability to find space and a finish in set piece scenarios. And if LAFC have a ton of the ball or Bouanga's in open space and you got to foul him,
the ball. If it goes the way you say, he's one of the guys who can come inside, change things. He can throw a defense off where you feel like your lines are clean. He adds into the attack and has a good background. Whichever one you want to pick. If one of them is clean and efficient with the chances they create, Houston can win this game. If the two of them don't finish or make the right decision in the final third, Houston will create chances that they probably don't put away. And at some point, Bouanga or Vela will find their chance. And I can't see Houston winning if one of those two doesn't elevate their game in this one.
Interesting. Corey Baird basically had just goose egg zeros on the score sheet until late May for the Dynamo. Scored 3 in the Open Cup, scored against Vancouver, and then the goal in the game that doesn't matter in Houston. He scored there, and from then on, he's been on a nice run.
I think we don't even watch on Saturday. I think we replay the June games.
Hell yeah.
We all get together. We rewatch those. We
Yeah.
live commentate
Maybe
them.
we can overlay the games onto each other
Maybe.
and just compare.
Yeah, compare the games as they go
just
along.
see the shape, because look, Ben Olsen was in a 4-4-2 resty just deep in his own half. Maybe we just overlay this. Could
Yeah.
be good.
The absolute disrespect from you guys that your man has 9 career
the long
professional.
pause.
Man has
I did not know
9
where that was going there.
Yeah.
for a second.
career
I had no
professional
idea.
goals. 4 of them are in the MLS Cup playoffs. Last week, of course, being one of them. I think he also had one for LAFC a couple of years ago.
And he scored in MLS Cup 2018
Yeah.
version.
Maybe Maxime Crepeau, Steve Clark. I mean, that's always going to be one. Crepeau was huge against Seattle.
Crepeau played Brazzara's strength. So,
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a wash.
yeah,
Chiellini or Long? Or is it a question?
Chiellini, there's no question. There's no.
2 ringers in the playoffs.
Well, I don't
It
think
was
they didn't-
disgusting.
they didn't decide
and I'm
it in
in the
that moment.
captain's group chat about it. It was co-ed, not men's league. We lost in the semifinal, and the team that won, they put a picture in, and then someone followed up oh, what team is that? Because they didn't know the name of the team. But my thing was oh, you should invite those 2 players to come to any other game because it was cool that they showed up for the playoffs and have never played for you before. Shame on you. Shame on you. I don't know which camera I'm looking into because I don't know who on that team would ever know this, but shame
That's
on
some
you.
good. Some good Instagram reporting. You could go back and see previous Graham stories, pictures. Maybe they threw it up on a different time. Just
outta
compare the
here.
rosters.
I've played this team enough. I would know if there was a guy on the team that I wasn't in with. It was a mini game. I wasn't within 40 yards of these guys. Every shot they took, they would just break my ankle and then just rip a shot.
You would remember.
So
that.
Chiellini, I get it. I feel it. It's tough.
How about Nelson Quinones?
Yeah, what David said. The Quinones and Baird.
I
There,
missed the Quinones part.
there are going to be chances for the
So
Dynamo.
focused on Corey Baird. Crab and the whole thing.
Quinones has a lot of talent. Like I said, he made the wrong decision every single time in the final third against Sporting Kansas City. There are times where he, very obvious 6, he pulls it back to no one, on the corner of the box. It was encouraging and tough at the same time, and it's encouraging because he gets into those spots in the first place, and there are very obvious things they can work on in film sessions this week. It is tough because it's the last week of film session of the year potentially.
Based on what I know, they've been working on film session with that for the entire.
Yeah,
season
so it's
with
all
Nelson.
there, but I mean that is a very good X factor, right? Because if he gets it, if it clicks, then he could be the guy who scores a goal and gets an assist and breaks LAFC's line time after time after time in this one. And if not, Franco Escobar is going to bail him out. I love what Houston does. I don't think they can do it to the level they need to and not expose themselves 2 times. And that is one more time than Dennis Bouanga has needed this year.
LAFC are an underrated defensive team. They press you. They're organized in the back. They win aerials, one of the best in the league in that sense. And they're not going to give Houston as much space and time and freedom as a lot of the teams in this postseason have. I think LAFC win it. Denny Bouanga scores again.
Yeah.
My heart says Houston. I love watching Houston. I'm probably deep down in some way rooting for Houston. I just think LAFC have too much.
Yeah, I mean, no matter what, I think we get a good MLS Cup of
Yeah.
you're either looking at a team trying to go back to back, or you look at a Houston team elevating the soccer they play against the 2 Ohio teams. But I even step away from LAFC and look at Houston and say, look what they did to KC, and they only scored 1 goal off a set piece. They didn't finish in the run of play, and their inability to put the game away via scoring that second goal in that game and against RSL to Bouanga or whoever, I think they could create those chances as well. I just don't trust them to finish them. And at this point of the playoffs, if Jordan Morris can't finish at a high enough level to knock off LAFC, feels hard to think Corey Baird and Nelson Quinones can.
Cool.
Corey Baird, Stanford as well. Whoa.
Yeah, I mean, Corey Baird's had a really good year, 14 goals, 8 assists across
Do
all
it, Corey
competition.
Baird. Against his former team.
Against his former team.
LAFC, he
Revenge
bleeds
game.
black and gold for 3 months.
He'll get his chances.
Yeah.
He will.
I think he's a free agent too, huh?
Yeah,
He's going to make a little money.
I would say so.
6 p.m. Eastern, Cincinnati Columbus Hell is Real. Coverage starts at 5:30 p.m. Eastern for that one on MLS Season Pass on Apple TV. 9:30 is the kickoff time for LAFC Houston. We have a full hour in the studio ahead of that game at BMO Stadium. Anything to add here? Anything to juice our Spotify listen to numbers that you guys want to dive into, or we feel good?
Did we talk? We did talk about all the other stuff around the league.
I mean, briefly, how do you feel about Tomas Chancalay and Gustavo Bo? Probably.
Wait, is Bo coming back?
Seems like he's out.
Okay, yeah.
Chancalay is now the third DP.
Okay.
The way things stand.
That makes sense to me. With Barrero getting healthy and Chancalay here and Nacho Heel, the Revs look very much like a 4-2-3-1 team next year, which I think they should be. Got to probably buy out Vrioni and go out and get a DP number 9.
You have to buy him out? Surely someone, somehow, somewhere.
You think?
I don't know. The other thing is, if Gustavo Bo doesn't want to leave, you could potentially get him on a deal where you can bring him back, and then you can sort of leave Veroni for the like. You have potential DP talent at a non.
I mean, your window's closing soon.
Yeah, but that's why
Carlos Heel's 31 years old.
I think the ideal is that Gustavo Bo would do that. The question is Gustavo Bo down to do that, or are they down to give him sporting director, or he was the technical director? They haven't hired a sporting director. They don't have a head coach, so.
Finger on the trigger enough to be like, yeah, this guy was really good. Chancalay was fantastic this year, coming in a tough spot in midseason as this team sort of fell apart, and he continued to score. I think next year, if he can take over games a little bit more, take some of the pressure off Heel, as well as Doyle bring up Barrero, who is a game breaker on his own. So Chancalay, I think, can sort of float in and get the ball more and play to his feet because he doesn't have to be the guy that stretches the field. They could be
players basically advocating for Oscar Pareja.
Oh, no. I didn't even see that.
Which to be like you have to advocate for a guy who's been as successful as Oscar Pareja. And someone tweeted at me or blue skied, whatever, at me. That,
Are you blue skying?
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to switch. That like if Orlando, or even if Orlando offer the contract to bring Oscar Pareja back, Joe Mansueto and the Chicago Fire should be like, we'll beat it by $1 million. Just come fix what's happening in Chicago. But like, it doesn't seem like Chicago's making those kinds of moves this offseason.
How do you guys feel about the sin bin? Should we trial the sin bin on
I
extra
read the
time?
whole article about it. Yeah, probably.
Really?
I deserved it for the
after
open.
I forgot to use the cough button, you turned my mic off.
I think I stepped on you
5 minutes?
3 times in the open as well, so I probably should have taken 10 minutes off.
Yeah,
right
just
out the
throw
gate.
you in the sin bin.
Go eat some shawarma, hang out in the back.
Yeah.
Back when I'm ready.
The sin bin is just gonna lead to like insane amounts of time wasting when you're trying to kill a power player.
Player has to go in goal. The way now you can write it how you want to. What we're talking about is IFAB okayed for, and IFAB is the organization based out of, I believe, Amsterdam, where they okay what rule changes can happen. They don't enforce them on leagues. So now it's open for leagues to do it. And obviously there's been conversation around having players go off the field for a segment of time rather than giving them a red card or a yellow card in ways in which they've affected the game. I think one of the big ones they're going to try and use it for to get out is like
5 Zurich, Switzerland, by the way,
is where it's based. Of course.
Correct.
Why would I not?
Yeah,
why would I not have thought of that?
100%.
Of
But this
always
is like,
neutral.
You know, if you're an indoor soccer fan, you know about the blue card.
There you go.
So there's an element of blue card to this.
So, but like the FA has used it at the lowest level, I think youth level, and then some like amateur stuff. Goals in goal. Then when the 10 minutes end, you wave the player on like coming off an injury. The goalkeeper has to play field until the next stoppage in which they can officially switch.
I want this.
I think the one thing I will say is I think yellow cards don't actually stop players from doing things because referees are scared to give a second yellow. And I think red cards ruin games. For the most part, if I'm a neutral and I'm watching a soccer game, I will probably turn off 5 minutes after the red card was given. It's not really soccer anymore. It's not what I tuned in for, especially with some teams, with styles, the way they play. So I think finding something in between to like punish a team for killing the game, but also not ruining the rest of the game is worth finding. I don't know if this is it. Also, don't call it a sin bin, especially here. Call it a penalty box.
I don't know. We've exported enough of our
sin bin is a little
jargon.
bit preachy.
Yeah,
No,
it's
it's Canadian. Canadians are now influencing.
do they not call it a penalty
They call it
in hockey?
They call it a sin bin.
Do they really?
Yeah, that's where it comes from.
I just assumed it was from England.
No.
In Canada, when they are watching hockey and someone gets sent to the penalty box,
Colloquially, they will call it a sin bin.
do they really?
Yeah. I learned it from watching Hartford Whalers games
Wow.
as a youth.
I've gotten a lot of Timbits, and I've never heard that
Yeah,
before,
well,
so I didn't know.
The IFAB also approved potentially referees communicating VAR decisions to the crowd, like you would see
Which
in an NFL game. Which
I
I
saw at the
absolutely
Women's
should-
World Cup.
Yeah.
no, I like that.
And like I hope that is a change that is coming, because it's like, just release the conversation to, communicate to the crowd, but also release the conversation.
Pro is releasing those inside video review on YouTube. You can go watch that series every week. They release the audio from those conversations. It's just that you can't have it currently on the broadcast, I
Yeah.
believe. You can't pipe it in where it's like, hey, we've got a review ongoing. Instead of us hearing from the announcers, let's just listen in on the referees as they make this
I think international field hockey and maybe rugby, but I don't know. They do where it's like live tapped in.
Australian rules
Listen to
football
guys.
too.
Oh, I love Aussie rules. I
made
barrack
I
for
just
Carlton.
made that up. I just completely made that up.
Man.
Maria wants us to end this, so we shall, because Doyle bought us all Lebanese food for lunch.
Oh yeah. Hey.
What a kind, benevolent.
It's weird. We don't need to talk
Yeah.
about this.
All right, adios. Have a great week.